Why the hell is the CEO's espresso machine hissing like Satan's humidifier again? I grumbled, crawling behind the server rack with a flashlight in my teeth and a 3-day-old apple in my jacket. That cursed device was connected to the identical circuit as the climate control for the East Wing. Something I only discovered following the great latte-induced power outage of 2011. Nobody ever recorded that. Naturally, nobody except myself ever recorded anything in this place. Yet I understood because I remember everything. That morning had begun like every other for the past 21 years. Me, Evelyn Ruth Bennett, opening the office entrance at 6:47 a.m., 23 minutes prior to official hours with the original brass key they provided me in 2002. I'd grease it twice annually. You'd be amazed how many executives can't operate a key if the mechanism squeaks. Assume it's defective like their judgment. The janitorial staff had abandoned gum in the basin again. Someone from development accidentally abandoned sushi in the compact refrigerator during the weekend. The fermented tea detonated. Not my responsibility technically, not in any agreement. Yet guess who removed seaweed from a smart appliance with a protected schedule and a rubber scraper? This woman. Some days, I felt like the human version of duct tape. I maintained everything functional in complete silence, got utilized exactly the same manner, only recognized when something failed. The executive believed I was still reception despite my business card stating facilities and operations director. And my messages contained 3,200 unopened critical emails from individuals who couldn't replace a printer cartridge to preserve their cryptocurrency portfolios. It deteriorated when they recruited that fresh HR manager, Jessica. Recently graduated, all smiles and buzzwords. She once inquired where the network cable connected. I informed her in the structure. Darling, identical location your employment performance is heading. She didn't chuckle. Now, I ain't no social media influencer, yet evidently 97% of people consuming these narratives don't subscribe. That's like showing up to a potluck empty-handed and still going home with Tupperware. So, proceed, press that subscribe icon. Maintains the electricity flowing and the petty revenge continuing. Returning to the disaster. I didn't attend prestigious universities. Didn't sport blazers that cost more than my vehicle. Yet I understood that structure, not like a facilities coordinator understands it. No, I understood it like you understand an elderly pet. Which conduits groaned when precipitation approached. Which temperature control malfunctioned when the moisture reached 70%. Where the electrical panel creaked like a possessed dollhouse if you accessed it excessively rapidly. I'd maintained that organization functioning through power fluctuations, bathroom disasters, and 3 executives' worth of terrible choices. And they simply disregarded. 0 acknowledgement, 0 incentive, 0 personal messages from management. Simply once when I remained late to personally clear the ladies' facilities after someone dropped an identification badge in it. Don't inquire. The previous VP of accounting provided me a partially consumed protein snack and stated, "You're a blessing, Mary. My designation is Evelyn." Eventually, I ceased correcting them. I wasn't attempting to be the champion. I simply trusted in executing things properly. That contract, the one that permitted us to occupy premium downtown property for a fraction of the present market value, I arranged that when we couldn't even receive a property owner to acknowledge a communication. Organization had 5 staff members and a transmission device maintained with adhesive. The originator requested if I'd co-endorse. Hell, I simply placed the entire contract under my designation. Nobody else possessed the credit rating then. I didn't object, they were like relatives. Like most relatives, they ultimately disregarded who maintained the electricity functioning. You ever enter a space you've devoted decades supervising and abruptly understand nobody observes you except the copier malfunctions or there's a rodent in the refreshment area? That was myself. Transparent until complications arose. Then, abruptly, I was everyone's caretaker and custodian combined. Heaven forbid the cooling ceased functioning. Then, I was Empress Evelyn, rescuer of perspiration. So affirmative, I maintained appearing silent, capable, unwavering like furnishings. Then arrived that Monday. Personnel distributed an organization-wide communication declaring strategic realignment opportunities, which in HR terminology is like a crime boss stating, "Accompany us for a drive." My intuition froze. I'd witnessed sufficient executives weep into expensive water during reductions to understand what approached. I was subsequent, and I wasn't going to weep. I'd already begun recalling items they overlooked they were liable for. And this instance, I wasn't going to sanitize their disaster. The invitation arrived at 4:58 p.m., simply as I was removing a dried wrap from the coffee equipment. Topic line, brief alignment personnel. 0 background, 0 caution. simply a schedule item deposited onto my day, like excrement in a refreshment container. I entered the following dawn, timely as constantly, sporting my gray sweater with the tear in the sleeve and a mark resembling Delaware. The sweater had witnessed 3 executives, 1 workplace fire, and an unexpected infant celebration that concluded in separation. It was my protection. Jessica from personnel was already positioned in meeting space B. She grinned like a step-parent from a television drama. Adjacent to her, some individual from legal I'd never encountered previously. Polished appearance, shinier footwear, and a directory he wouldn't cease caressing like it contained the solution for illness within. Evelyn, appreciation for arriving. Jessica chirped. We desired to conduct a minor restructuring discussion. That term restructuring struck harder than a container of tools. I'd interpreted it for others, supported their hands, managed their responsibilities. I understood the pattern completely. Initially arrived the grin, then the directory, then the regret that wasn't genuinely regret. We're proceeding in a fresh path, she stated. I gazed at her. That path wouldn't occur to incorporate me in it. Correct? Quietness. Then a gentle slide of the directory over the surface, within a standard separation arrangement with additional bureaucracy, then a holiday crime location. 3 months compensation, confidentiality provision, medical coverage through the period's conclusion. How charitable. The correspondence didn't even spell my designation correctly. Labeled me Evelyn J. Hawkins. 21 years, and they still couldn't record my title. We're requesting your identification and access today, the attorney included monotone. Additionally, any organizational assets in your control. I drew a respiration that could have fractured plaster, and I accessed my container and placed the identification on the surface like a gambling token. Following the access, all 11 of them categorized in my script from 2002, when I utilized to remain late to reconfigure the entrance mechanisms personally. You certain? I inquired, gaze secured on Jessica. She flickered. Apologies, you certain you desire these? Final opportunity. She provided me that personnel expression, understanding, tasteless, artificial as substitute butter. It's not individual. Certainly it ain't, I whispered, rising. Simply recall, you can't terminate what you never comprehended. I departed before I could incinerate the location with my gaze. The sunlight seemed acute on my exterior. The walkway hummed with sound, yet I was insensitive. I didn't weep. Not before them. Not following 21 years of sanitizing their disasters, repairing their devices, soothing their apprentices during anxiety episodes. They desired to disregard me. Acceptable, yet they disregarded excessively. I didn't travel directly residence. I entered a coffee establishment parking area, remained in the automobile with the /SE deactivated, and contacted Marcus. Marcus was my previous neighbor's offspring, developed maintaining my property. Currently, he's a property attorney with a wireless device permanently connected to his skull and an anxious reaction when individuals state arbitration. He responded on the following signal. Evelyn, everything satisfactory? No, I stated, yet it's preparing to be. You recall that contract we created in 02? A hesitation, then a quiet whistle. Oh, he stated that contract. Affirmative, do they understand? I grinned for the initial instance that day. Not a pleasant grin, a hazardous one. They simply requested the access, I stated. So, I believe it's period I provided them everything they requested for. My residence smelled like furniture cleaner and vintage conflict films, my method of remaining rational. I deposited my container by the entrance, removed my footwear, and proceeded directly to the corridor storage where I maintained the in case they attempt something foolish documentation. Never believed I'd genuinely access it. Yet here we existed. Directory was bright pink, marked in permanent marker. Contract 2002 Evelyn exclusively. I extracted it with the identical caution you'd utilize for diffusing an explosive. Within initial contract arrangement, 7 modifications, a statement for the carpet I acquired for the entrance before we could manage furnishings, and 3 adhesive papers with illustrations from the originator's child when the workplace was a solitary space above a Vietnamese restaurant. 21 years previously, they couldn't obtain a contract if their existence relied on it. 0 credit, 0 income, 1 computer in a transmission connection that created a noise like a perishing raccoon. The originator, Charlie, positioned opposite from me at a diner and stated, Evelyn, if you don't co-endorse, we'll be operating from my storage. My spouse will eliminate me. I didn't co-endorse. I endorsed the complete cursed document personally, simply until we achieve stability. He stated we never conducted that discussion again because, following that, it was constantly myself who renewed the contract. Myself who managed with the facility supervisor, Myself, who arranged the climate control installations, the flooring substitution, the peculiar odor in Section C that resulted to be a deceased rodent within the padding. They never eliminated my designation from the contract, never even inquired. I positioned at my dining surface, accessed a Diet Cola, and began examining like my self-respect was concealed somewhere in that small text. Section 12, Clause 9, B. Extension of contract duration shall demand documented notification from the tenant no later than 30 days before termination. I flickered, examined it once more. Then I verified the termination timestamp. August 1st. Today was August 3rd, 2 days overdue. They hadn't extended, hadn't even communicated. Not a sound from legal, not a statement from Jessica, not a solitary emergency contact regarding permits or lease conditions. They were so occupied congratulating each other and exchanging designations that they overlooked the most critical target in the organization's material presence. I reclined in my seat. A lengthy, gradual smile spread over my expression. The type of grin you display when you understand the cosmos simply provided you the access to the empire. It wasn't simply that they terminated me, it was how they terminated me, like a blemish on a pane, like I was simply some expendable middle-aged female with a collection of outdated information. Yet observe, my information managed the cursed structure. They disregarded I was still the tenant, the legitimate occupant. And presently, they were trespassers with espresso devices. I collected my device and began browsing. Coverage agreement still in my designation. Climate control agreement extended previous year beneath my personal communication. Sanitation providers solely appeared because I electronically transferred the supervisor monthly beneath structure maintenance account. Services directed through a commercial profile I established with the municipality in 2005. When the electricity failed each instance, someone utilized the heating device and the copier simultaneously. Everything that signified still functioned through myself. I could caution them, I could distribute a communication, transmit the contract conditions with a topic line like, "Hey, overlooked something." That's not what they would have executed if the positions were exchanged. Number. If the situation was opposite, they'd be partially through substituting me with a younger version who doesn't understand how to restore the electrical system without searching online. So I secured the contract directory, I dispensed another cola, and I determined for the initial instance in 2 periods to remain completely silent. Allow them experience the quietness. Allow them discover the boundary when they step past it. Allow the espresso device be their initial indication because presently they were intruding. And I possessed the documentation to demonstrate it. I donned my formal footwear to the conference with the facility supervisor, not because I required to appear sophisticated, yet because they created a more audible sound when I traversed stone surfaces. I desired the environment to perceive me approaching. Richard, the facility supervisor, glanced up from his display when I entered his workplace on the 4th level. He was the type of individual who constantly smelled like photocopier ink and possessed 17 various markers on his workspace for zero legitimate purpose. "Evelyn," he stated, astonished, "didn't believe I'd observe you returning here." I grinned. "Let's simply state I'm present in a heritage function." He angled his skull like a bewildered retriever. I positioned, extracted my directory, and provided him the contract documents. Initial modifications, all remaining immaculate, precisely down to the single adhesive paper where the originator sketched a soaring burrito throughout our 2009 extension conference. "I desire to validate something," I stated. There was zero documented extension demand presented by July 1st. "Accurate?" He flickered, began typing frantically at his interface like it was indebted to him. Negative, not from the organization. Zero recorded in the database. I presumed they were proceeding month to month while they negotiated a fresh arrangement. We hadn't received anything formal. I agreed peaceful as a monument. Excellent. That aligns because beneath Provision 9B, it transforms to month-to-month occupation if zero notification is obtained. Richard reclined. His seat groaned like an elderly joint. Officially, affirmative, that's accurate. I extracted additional document from my container, gradual and intentional. It was sharp, heavy material, gold-decorated letterhead. I'd prefer to officially inform you of a contract cancellation, active in 30 days. His eyebrows elevated so elevated I believed they'd submit for workplace compensation. Pause. "You're canceling it?" Affirmative. As the occupant of documentation, they overlooked the extension period and I've already arranged a substitute occupant. He ingested forcefully. "Do they understand they will?" The fresh occupant was a health enterprise labeled Zenith Wellness, all organic beverages and crafted oxygen cleaners, youthful, saturated with investor capital, and frantic for central metropolitan footage to establish their Himalayan mineral barrier and meditation stations. I encountered the creator at a producer's bazaar previous year while acquiring vegetables. She presented 3 times what the present contract was valued. Richard operated a palm through his diminishing locks. This is preparing to be complicated. Complicated, I stated, rising was what they provided me following 2 periods of dedication. I departed before he could inquire additional queries. Returning residents, I accessed a new judicial file on my computer and completed the spaces. Complainant, Evelyn Ruth Bennett. Respondent, present tenant, section 2011 to 2221. Purpose for removal, inability to extend contract, substantial violation, and subletting absent disclosure. I discovered they leased a rear workplace to some digital currency advisor absent ever informing me. Additional minor mistake. I submitted it digitally via the district gateway. Compensated additional to accelerate. The verification communication struck my messages with a pleasant notification that caused me to experience more youthful than cosmetic procedures ever might. Then, like precision, personnel communicated me. Topic: demand verification of restored assets. Beloved Evelyn, trust you're executing satisfactorily. We're contacting to validate you've restored all organizational assets, incorporating records, access, credentials, and additional material or electronic resources pertaining to organization title. Kindly acknowledge to validate fulfillment. Optimal, Jessica. I didn't pause. I selected acknowledge all because I understood Jessica preferred to duplicate partial the cursed organization to cause herself appear occupied. My acknowledgement, affirmative, incorporating the ones you overlooked I possessed. I pressed transmit and reclined in my seat. The structure signified something to me previously. I'd observed it develop from plaster and network cables into something polished and refined. I'd consumed additional meals at that primary workspace, then in my personal dining area. Chuckled with apprentices. Wept when I lost my pet and someone abandoned me, blossoms on the refreshment area surface. Yet affection possesses boundaries, and mine expired 2 days following. They transferred that directory over the surface. I wasn't simply achieving balance, I was recovering everything. 2 dawns subsequently, I positioned in my bright chamber, irrigating my tranquility plant with single palm and grasping the registered correspondence in the additional. Substantial packet, genuine signature marking, labeled with district judicial symbols and everything. Complainant, Evelyn Ruth Bennett. Respondent, organization title at tenant section 201221. Topic: notification of cancellation and requirement to abandon location. My designation in emphasis directly at the summit. It experienced unreal, like observing your personal memorial while consuming coffee. Excluding rather than demise, it was restoration. A restoration in leisure clothing and supportive footwear, yet regardless. Over municipality, the identical packet arrived in reception approximately 9:13 a.m. The facility supervisor transmitted it urgency delivery and communicated a duplicate simply to be certain. Regular process, 30-day notification. Occupant has neglected to extend. Fresh tenancy arranged. Pleasantly abandon or acknowledge via judicial networks. Difficulty was, the assistant that day was a temporary. Identification label stated Brittany in glitter writing tool. Likely believed it was unwanted mail. She discarded it in the disposal container between a container of terminated nutrition snacks and a damaged binding device. Simultaneously, above in the management area, the authority group was occupied shining their self-importance. Initial offering discussions, identity updates. One of them was presenting a demonstration regarding disrupting verticals, whatever the hell that indicated. I'd observed the presentation materials on professional networking subsequently. It contained a generic image of a female chuckling while consuming greens and gesturing at a board. Revolutionary material. They were excessively occupied floating in their personal ambition broth to observe the current withdrawing. I remained on my furniture reviewing the notification, not because I questioned the legitimacy. Marcus ensured it was watertight. I simply required to experience it. The mass. The result. This wasn't simply some personnel disagreement anymore. This was a countdown device enclosed in administration and secured with a bureaucratic ribbon. And I'd activated the mechanism. There was an instant, possibly 20 moments, where remorse attempted to insert its method. That structure had been my alternate residence. I'd repaired its fractures, calmed its complaints, maintained it comfortable and functioning. I'd observed marriages declared in that workplace, infants delivered, relationships flourish, and collapse with identical intensity. It indicated something previously, yet presently it was simply a container filled with individuals who believed heritage indicated sluggish. So I returned the notification into the packet and transferred it into my documentation storage directly behind my separation documents and 2 outstanding traffic violations I was preserving for entertainment. That's when my device vibrated. Mike, facilities individual. Hey, you satisfactory? Something's unusual around here. Primary workspace received a judicial notification, yet nobody's discussing. Location experiences unusual. Mike was one of the excellent ones. Silent individual. Understood how to substitute a lighting component absent complaining regarding it. Previously assisted me pursue a opossum from the refreshment area roof panels. I nearly acknowledged with I'm satisfactory. That experienced dishonest. So I transmitted me, I'm beyond satisfactory, Mike. I'm simply, ultimately being observed. He didn't acknowledge immediately, likely still processing whatever rumors was developing. I envisioned the bewilderment. The management presuming the correspondence was an error or a joke, or possibly they'd accuse a supplier. They were excellent at that, delegating responsibility like it was maintenance duty. Yet the mechanism was operating, and I'd already arranged the ignition source, fuel, and extinguisher simply distance sufficient that they'd never access it in duration. The meeting chamber at Marcus's practice smelled like scorched espresso and coated ambition. Artificial vegetation in each edge, one of those inspirational displays that states achievement above an image of a cliff climber preparing to perish. Marcus positioned opposite from me in a navy pinstriped outfit that caused him to appear like an anxious puppet performer. Yet his palms were consistent as he transferred the concluding contract exchange file over the surface. All you require to execute is endorsed directly there beneath departing occupant and once more on section 4, beneath permitting individual. He paused, writing tool in palm. You remain satisfied with this? I gazed down at the document. Sharp medical, frigid as Jessica Grin. Arriving occupant Zenith Wellness Corporation. Active timestamp August 31st, 12 p.m. Contract conditions $12,800 per month. Triple net 5-year agreement authorization line Evelyn Ruth Bennett. I collected the writing tool. 0 additional considerations, Marcus inquired, solely that I didn't execute this earlier. The writing tool moved over the section like an execution device, and simply like that, 21 years of organizational recollection exchanged to a meditation kingdom with a social media inspiration collection. Marcus exhaled. I'll present this to the facility supervisor this midday. Magistrate previously sanctioned the removal. You'll receive notification of display within 2 days. I lifted an eyebrow. They'll receive 2 days to abandon. He agreed. From the instant the notification strikes the entrance, 0 petition, 0 flexibility space. They overlooked the extension period, sublet unlawfully, and didn't acknowledge to cancellation documentation. You provided them the cord. They constructed the platform. I departed the workplace with a duplicate of the endorsed files placed orderly in a folder marked resolution. Not vengeance, not achieve balance, simply resolution, because that's what this was presently. A sanitary, medical conclusion to 2 periods of being transparent while supporting the structure. Subsequently, that dusk, I entered my automobile and traveled central. The municipality appeared distinct at darkness, more polished, more frigid, like everything had been covered in metal and disappointment. I stationed opposite the avenue from the structure and deactivated the motor. Maintained the illumination deactivated, simply observed. The illumination were remaining activated in the management sections, likely consuming through a few grand in extended compensation and delivered Japanese cuisine. Jessica was likely organizing additional internal atmosphere presentation. The executive was likely somewhere in the edge, rehearsing his financier presentation in the reflection with a whiskey in single palm and a deception in the additional. I consumed my service location espresso and lowered the pane. The structure positioned there, unaware, quiet, illuminated like holiday celebration, and simply as unaware to what approached. That identical structure that previously experienced, like mine, presently, an outsider. I gazed up at section 221, the Edge workplace, my previous workspace, presently filled by some assignment coordinator who believes climate control represents pleasant atmosphere and espresso. I grinned, not from spite, not even happiness. It was the grin of a female observing a cargo locomotive progress toward an individual whose excessively occupied messaging to perceive it approaching. They possessed 0 concept that the following dawn, district enforcement would be attaching a bright orange notification to their crystal entrances. That, in 2 days, each board discussion, each exercise sphere seat, each bean container in the creativity area would be packed into a relocation vehicle with Zenith Wellness preparing behind them, currency in palm and aromatherapy prepared. I remained there until the illumination began to extinguish. Then I traveled residence. Pane lowered. Breeze in my locks. Folder on the companion chair. and a type of tranquility I hadn't experienced since 2003. Directly approximately the period I discovered that appreciation possesses a termination timestamp. Yet, advantage remains preserved eternally. At precisely 8:03 a.m., Jessica walked into the structure like a smug department store display. Nut beverage coffee in palm. Neutral footwear tapping like an ovation soundtrack solely she could perceive. She hesitated by the primary workspace and provided the temporary assistant a enthusiastic, artificial grin. "Any communications?" she chirped. Brittany flickered. "Oh, affirmative, something unusual on the executive's entrance." Jessica rotated her gaze. Likely presumed it was additional inactive hostile adhesive paper from technology. Previous period, they attached a graphic of a comedian beneath the temperature control following someone adjusted it to 82 degrees. By 8:07, she was on the following level. By 8:08, she was positioned before the executive's workplace with her jaw unhinged like a python at a barbecue. Bright orange removal notification, protected, cable secured to the grip, endorsed, confirmed, and delivered. Notification to abandon assets in violation of contract. 2 days. She extracted her device, hands trembling like she simply exceeded on alternative dairy. Contacted structure protection. Attempted to remove the notification from the crystal, yet it maintained secure-like decision. By 8:30, the executive showed up disheveled, wireless in single ear. Likely believed he was entering additional dominate the period dawn. Rather, he discovered Jessica walking, the complete promotion department observing, and a judicial file cable secured to his entrance like a conclusion display. He pulled it, examined it, flickered once, then once more. By 9:02, his device sounded. It was Richard, the facility supervisor. "Mr. Preston," Richard stated. "Peaceful in business. This is to validate implementation of contract cancellation. We were informed through registered delivery and communication above 2 weeks previously. We obtained zero acknowledgement. We presumed your quietness was deliberate." "Deliberate?" Preston shouted. "Naturally. Who would disregard a 30-day judicial notification except they intended to?" Richard stated. The smile in his tone was perceptible. By 9:10, terror established. Management began entering the workplace individually, each responding to the bright document like it was an active explosive. Personnel assembled in crisis conference in the crystal meeting chamber, where openness was additional concrete than symbolic. They secured the screens partially, then understood excessively delayed that they didn't extend the base of the crystal. The complete level observed their breakdown like it was live television. By 10:15, someone ultimately determined who the complainant was. Jessica accessed her computer, extracted the reviewed judicial files connected to the communicated duplicate they'd disregarded. There it was, clear as daylight. Complainant, Evelyn Ruth Bennett. Pause. "Evelyn," she murmured. "Mike from operations. Appreciate him." Agreed seriously in the refreshment area. "Informed you something was unusual." Simultaneously, I was residence in my bright chamber, beverage preparing, feline on my lap, device vibrating like a colony. Marcus messaged initially. "Marcus, it's executed. They contacted structure protection. Enforcements arriving the following day. You're a icon." Then, Mike. "They appear like ants in a microwave. Satisfied with you." Then the regional commerce publication published a title. "Central Technology Company removed during property conflict. Source suggests at administration breakdown." The piece didn't designate me specifically, yet the discussion area completed the spaces. Someone transferred a fuzzy image of the removal notification. Additional contributed, "Wasn't their workplace supervisor there like 20 years? Someone else answered, "Wager she understood where all the corpses were concealed." I consumed my beverage. It had been concealed beneath unappreciated duties and transparent labor for 2 periods. Nobody provided me blossoms on administrative day. Nobody observed when I remained until 9 p.m. restarting the network with a writing tool. Yet they were observing presently. They simply didn't understand this wasn't even the concluding performance. Not immediately. The contact arrived at 7:42 p.m. I was partially through arranging my seasoning collection, alphabetical, naturally. A female requires structure somewhere in this chaotic existence, and the display illuminated with a designation I hadn't observed since the day he overlooked mine at the holiday celebration. "Preston, Derek, executive." I allowed it signal 2 times. 3 periods, responded on the 4th. Evelyn communicating. "He didn't spend duration. What the hell is occurring? You can't execute this," he bellowed, tone fracturing like an adolescent discovered with the electronic cigarette. I positioned him on amplifier, dispensed myself a serving of fermented grapes, and reclined opposite the surface like I was preparing for my preferred comedy. Because genuinely, I was. "I completely can," I stated, peaceful as new precipitation. And I executed. Examine your contract. You're removing a complete organization. Do you possess any concept what this appears like? The management's alarmed. We've received media surrounding like scavengers. Our financiers, I interrupted him with an exhale. Derek, allow me halt you there. You terminated the individual who maintained the access. All of them structure judicial functional recollection. You didn't even inquire who endorsed the contract. We presumed it was. That's the difficulty. I stated, you presumed regarding everything, regarding myself, regarding the organization, regarding what I was valued. There was quietness on the additional side, a struggling respiration, likely his circulation ascending Mount Stupid. You ambushed us, he stated, attempting to transition into the position of casualty. No, I adjusted. I acknowledged to being ambushed. Distinction is I arrived equipped. I accessed my communication. Customer created a fresh communication to executive at and duplicated judicial at Jessica personnel at, and simply for entertainment operations at Mike warranted the performance. Topic line organization assets as demanded content connected is the thorough initial contract arrangement incorporating all modifications, composer provisions, and the subletting breaches you neglected to reveal as you demanded verification that I restored all organization files regard this completion of that demand, connection, contract, cancellation, ERB, endorsed document. I pressed transmit while Preston was remaining respirating substantially into the device. This doesn't return on you, he ultimately snarled. The management is preparing to, they'll execute what they constantly execute. I stated rotating my fermented grapes safeguard themselves, possibly discard you to the predators if they're famished sufficient, yet they won't contact me because I possess the documentation and Zenith Wellness has previously transferred the initial 2 periods lease. That silenced him. I proceeded, and simply to explain, I didn't betray the organization. I simply ceased transporting it on my spine. The connection remained silent for a few moments, then terminated. I breathed out, didn't grin, didn't smile, simply positioned there, experiencing the massive years transfer from my frame like aged coating throughout a tempest. The structure's fresh occupants were arranged to commence relocating the subsequent Monday. Zenith Wellness possessed a greeting display, produced, and everything. Your atmosphere begins here. Not precisely my style, yet they compensated punctually and understood how to examine a contract. Simultaneously, the previous team was rushing to discover a provisional location that wasn't a commercial center meeting chamber or the executive's excessive residence with zero operational connectivity. I elevated my serving to the vacant dining area, to conclusions, to advantage, to being misjudged until it was excessively cursed, delayed. They desired organization assets restored. I simply provided it returned with premium. By Friday dawn, organization was in complete terror acquisition mode, delivering desperate attempts at each business property owner in a 10-mile perimeter. Tail possessed it, they even attempted to influence Richard, the facility supervisor, with performance passes and assurances of standing administration possibilities. One of the management apparently presented him a establishing health collaboration, whatever that nonsense indicates. Excessively minimal, excessively delayed. The contract with Zenith Wellness was previously secured, authenticated, and displayed in their creator's fresh workplace. Section 221. She was previously selecting the decoration, something with plant foliage and positive statements. The technology organization, simultaneously, was removed like a university residence that overlooked to compensate lease for a term. Monday dawn struck like an instrument released from the 10th level. I remained on my terrace with a container of dark espresso and in vintage compact broadcast performing traditional music while the disorder developed 4 streets distant. The atmosphere was azure, the creatures were vocalizing. Below on 6th Avenue, the previous favorites of Central were transporting Herman Miller seats and partially vacant espresso containers into a leased transport with single absent rear illumination. Jessica donned eyewear the dimension of her pride and shouted into her device like she was arranging harmony in the global conflict. Someone had attached a section of copier document to the vehicle stating tactical migration, pleasant attempt, assembly collected, individuals recorded, then arrived the seat. Preston Brown outfit, perspiration marks, crimson-faced, misplaced it entirely. A collapsible seat departed from his palms and struck the edge of the transport with an empty noise that reverberated from the structures like a miserable instrument. Someone published the recording with the description, "When your workplace justice strikes returned more forcefully than your initial offering strategies." 3 periods subsequently, it struck the primary section of technology, criticism then collapse signal, and ultimately embarrassment harbor. The discussions were harsh. Did they remove him or disconnect his pride? Seat launch equals authority beneath strain. Can someone inform him launching furnishings won't alter property regulations? Returned at residence, I received a tap on the entrance. It was a messenger grasping a container enclosed in transparent material, natural produce, purple beverage, a small container of yellow wellness treats. On summit, a message in flowing script. Evelyn, appreciation for the location and the narrative. Will maintain excellent attention of it. The Zenith Wellness Group. I chuckled. A genuine one. Profound from the core. Initial period in an extended duration. I positioned the container on the dining surface, dispensed myself a serving of fruit beverage, and proceeded to the corridor. There, on the barrier adjacent to my relative's images and my displayed initial compensation from 1981, suspended a minor metal fixture. I accessed the compartment and extracted the single item I'd preserved. 0 award, 0 celebration, simply alloy and recollection. The initial workplace access. I suspended it like a prize. Not because it opened anything presently, yet because previously it accessed everything, and presently it secured the section precisely how I desired, silently, legitimately, eternally. Value you remaining present, you icons of the refreshment area. Follow for additional disorder. Let's cause your previous supervisor discharge their espresso in terror.